I recognize the member from Saskatoon Church Hill Wildwood.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It is a privilege to rise in the Assembly today to support the Government of Saskatchewan's position on addressing climate change and oppose the federal government's plan to unilaterally impose a national carbon tax. Perhaps a good place to start is to define climate change. The definition posted on the Government of Canada's website states, and I quote, "Climate change is a long-term shift in weather conditions measured by changes in temperature, precipitation, wind, snow, cover, and other indicators. It can involve both changes in average conditions and changes in variability, including, for example, changes in extreme conditions. Climate change can be caused by natural processes, such as changes in the output of the sun and in the amount of volcanic dust in the atmosphere. It can also be affected by human activities. In particular, human activities that involve burning fossil fuels, example coal and oil, can change the composition of the atmosphere through emissions of greenhouse gases and other substances. The buildup of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere is the primary cause for concern about climate change now and into the immediate future." End quote. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is important to note that global warming refers specifically to an increase in the global average surface temperature. Global warming is an indicator of climate change. So what does scientific evidence tell us will happen as a result of climate change? Let's see what some educational resources have to say. The Earth's climate is getting warmer. Rain patterns are changing, the sea level is rising, and snow and ice are melting sooner in the spring. These changes will affect people, animals, and ecosystems in many ways. Global warming causes ice sheets to melt in icy regions. The result is rising water levels that can cause floods and destruction in low-lying towns and cities along water bodies. Changing climate can cause the weather to become more extreme, be it droughts or heavy rains, with impacts on agriculture and food supplies, of particular concern to a growing human population. Climate change can change the natural habitats of plants and animals. Polar bears and penguins cannot survive elsewhere. Plants and animals in hot regions cannot survive if the temperature becomes too cold. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is accepted that the global warming since the mid-1950s has been largely attributed to human influences. We do know that as we generate carbon and other gases to feed people and participate in the economy, carbon dioxide gas in particular causes the Earth to warm, and this warming endangers our future. So, a decision has to be made on what approach is best to limit global climate change, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Do we look at adaptation whereby governments work with the sectors to ensure there are policies and technologies in place to assist with adaptation to the reality of climate change? A national cap-and-trade system that would place absolute limits on greenhouse gas emissions while allowing the trading of credits appears to carry considerable risk. This can provide emission reduction certainty, but not price certainty. Mr. Deputy Speaker, another approach is a tax to help reduce carbon emissions. Carbon taxes provide price certainty, but do not provide emission reduction target certainty. Therefore, I support the approach put forward by this government, that we focus on innovation and technological development to address climate change. Why? Because it offers the potential to significantly reduce global emissions while causing the least harm to our economy. Canada accounts for less than 2% of the world's emissions. In Saskatchewan, we are responsible for about 10% of Canada's total. Just like our history of leading the country in volunteer work, we are prepared to do our part and believe the best way to meet Canada's target of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 30% below 2005 levels by the year 2030 is through innovation and technology. Saskatchewan is often called Canada's breadbasket, as we produce over 54% of the country's wheat crop. Canada is the top mustard producer in the world, and 75% of that mustard comes from Saskatchewan. In this province, we have 40% of Canada's arable land, more farmland than all the other provinces combined. This arable land absorbs millions of tons of carbon dioxide. Saskatchewan farmers have significantly reduced carbon emissions by producing more food on less land and reducing the use of diesel fuel. The practice of no-till farming has enhanced fuel savings and soil conservation. Why should our farmers be penalized for carbon taxes on their fuel, fertilizer and farm equipment when they have reduced carbon emissions and are near to producing net zero carbon emissions by extracting carbon from the atmosphere and sequestering it in plants for the purpose of producing food? Stretch your memory back to elementary school when we learned about photosynthesis. People around the world need our high-quality food. We are producing more food and exporting more food as demand is increasing globally for our agricultural commodities. I am most reluctant to harm agriculture in this province through a carbon tax. Mr. Speaker, we are the most trade-dependent province in the country. We are a province that exports, and the process of getting our Saskatchewan goods to our customers will become more costly with a carbon tax. The premise of this carbon tax is that it will modify behaviour of Canadian citizens. But will it really work? British Columbia introduced a revenue-neutral carbon tax in 2008, and emissions have been rising in that province since 2012. Even with a carbon tax, BC's greenhouse gas emissions are forecast to increase by 32% by the year 2030. If this forecast is correct, there is no guarantee that a national carbon tax will achieve its goal of reducing carbon emissions. An Ipsos Reid poll conducted on behalf of Global News earlier this month found that 78% of respondents agreed that the carbon tax would, and I quote, "start with good intentions, but eventually just become another source of revenue that does not achieve its goals." End quote. Generating electricity accounts for about 20% of Saskatchewan's emissions, Mr. Speaker. As the primary electricity provider in this province, SaskPower has a goal to reduce emissions by 50% from 2005 levels by the year 2030. This goes beyond what is being asked for by the federal government. SaskPower will invest billions of dollars in upgrading the province's electricity system and is committed to 50% renewable electricity generation by increasing renewables like wind and solar. SaskPower has also made the largest per capita investment in clean technology in the world with its carbon capture and storage technology at Boundary Dam in Estevan. As almost half of our energy is coal in this province, we have chosen to answer that challenge with our own innovation. At present, about 40% of the world's electricity is generated using coal. Today, 2,400 coal-fired power plants are being built or planned in other countries. Our carbon capture technology can help the world clean up coal-fired electricity generation. Our innovation with CO2 storage doesn't stop with Boundary Dam. New generations of carbon capture and storage are in the works in this province. There are 3 jurisdictions in Canada that are expected to post actual GHG reduction from current emissions by the year 2030, according to the federal government: Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and here in Saskatchewan. We are already making strides towards efficiency and emission reductions without a carbon tax. I would like to take a moment to quote parts of an open letter to the Federal Minister of the Environment from the Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce. And I quote, "Canadians agree that a reduction in our carbon emissions is a positive goal, but also agree that the method of achieving this goal must be sustainable from both an economic and environmental perspective. The implementation of a tax, the direct and significant impact it would have on many energy and trade-intensive industries will be quick and dramatic. As most companies in these sectors are price takers and sell their products and services globally, they will not be able to pass on the increased costs, which will cause real and serious impacts to their operations. A blanket carbon tax will have a very negative effect on three key sectors. Transportation. As a province that relies upon truck and train transportation for trade, these transportation methods have no clean energy option. Agriculture. All fuels that power equipment will increase in price, as well as the related costs of fertilizers and the cost of steel in machinery. Saskatchewan agricultural producers have no option but to use fuels to produce the foods that help feed the world. Heating. All companies who sell, pay for, use, or service heating for buildings, drying grains, and even drying potash will be impacted." End quote. Mr. Speaker, the ABEX Award, sponsored by the Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce, celebrates excellence in Saskatchewan business, recognizing companies for not only their business success, but also their commitment to their employees and their communities, along with the growth they have achieved. I could not help but wonder at the awards banquet this weekend how a carbon tax would hinder the efforts of these Saskatchewan companies and disadvantage them with their global competitors. Can it be said that a carbon tax will definitively reduce emissions? It cannot. Can it be said that a carbon tax will damage our Saskatchewan economy? It can. Potash, oil and gas, uranium, agriculture. Saskatchewan's major industries are high-emitting industries. They must move their products to international markets. These industries, mainstays of our provincial economy, will be hard hit by a carbon tax. Can it be said that a carbon tax will prove costly to taxpayers in this province? It can. Heating, electrical and transportation costs will climb. Products will be more expensive. My constituents of Saskatoon-Churchill-Wildwood will pay more to heat their homes and drive their cars and buy their groceries. A carbon tax will take more money out of their pockets and the pockets of Saskatchewan families. How will we feel when someone we love loses their job as a result of the carbon tax, which has little impact on mitigating global climate change? Mr. Speaker, we all need to work towards solving the global problem of climate change. Saskatchewan needs to do its part, but we do not need to bear a disproportionate part. This carbon tax could serve as an impediment to growth if it is pushed through with no regard to the economic cost. The solution to climate change must involve fairness. The solution to climate change must protect our economy. The solution to climate change must protect our jobs here in this province. We can be leaders in a solution to climate change, but the solution is not through a carbon tax. I will be voting in favour of the motion. I do not support the amendment. I move to adjourn debate. Thank you.
The member from Saskatoon-Churchill-Wildwood has moved to adjournment of debate. Is it the pleasure of the Assembly to adopt the motion? Carried.